Hey guys, tonight we're going way back to a time before breweries, before vineyards, before anyone even had the language to slur their words. Imagine yourself in a world of stone and silence. You're barefoot, your breath turns to mist in the morning air, and your tribe just discovered something miraculous, or maybe disastrous depending on your liver. Someone somewhere left a pile of ripe fruit in the sun, and nature did what nature does best, it fermented. You probably won't survive this one, not because it's dangerous, but because you're about to taste the first accident in human history that made people giggle at nothing. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You crouch beside a cluster of bushes heavy with fallen fruit, figs, dates, maybe some ancient berries no longer found in supermarkets. The smell hits you first, sweet, tangy, just a little sharp. A few of your tribe have already been snacking on the mushy ones, laughing louder than usual. Their steps wobble, their faces flush, and you can't help but wonder what's gotten into them. It's around 9,000 years ago, give or take. Historians still argue whether this was in the mountains of China, the plains of Africa, or somewhere in between. But one thing's certain, fermentation wasn't invented, it was discovered. Early humans didn't set out to make alcohol. They simply noticed that time and warmth transformed food in strange ways. Sometimes it spoiled. Sometimes it made life a little funny. You take a tentative bite of the pulpy fruit. It's sweeter than you expect. The taste blooms in your mouth, tingling slightly. Soon you feel a gentle dizziness, a slow sway in your body. You laugh at nothing. Your brain, ancient and untrained, is meeting ethanol for the first time. Congratulations, you've just joined the world's first party. Scientists have found evidence of these early experiments in places like Jiahu, China, where Neolithic people brewed a sort of honey fruit rice wine around 7,000 BCE. They even found pottery shards with chemical traces of alcohol. Imagine that, 1,000 generations before wine glasses or breweries, someone was already trying to recreate that warm, pleasant haze that follows a few sips too many. You can almost see them, small groups huddled around fires, experimenting with mixtures of fruit, grain, and honey, not for preservation but for pleasure. Maybe it started as a ritual. Maybe it was pure curiosity. Either way, it became a cornerstone of community. Because after all, when people drink together, they laugh together, and laughter even then was a kind of language. The air around your campfire thickens with the smell of smoke and fermenting fruit. Someone starts humming, a low, rhythmic tone that others join. Your tribe doesn't have musical instruments yet, but you don't need them. The beat comes from the cracking fire, the human heartbeat, the occasional hiccup. It's not hard to picture this as the birth of something bigger than a hangover, the start of bonding, ritual, and myth. Modern researchers actually think alcohol may have played a key role in human social evolution. The chemical reward of intoxication, they suggest, encouraged cooperation. A shared buzz made early humans more trusting, more relaxed, more likely to form groups instead of fighting. In other words, the first drinks may have helped create civilization itself, not bad for rotting fruit. As night deepens, you look up at the sky, a massive velvet dome sprinkled with stars. The firelight flickers on your friends' faces. Someone trips, falls, and laughs so hard the rest of you can't help joining in. You're swaying, eyes half-lidded, feeling the earth tilt gently beneath your feet. No one knows words like hangover or fermentation yet, but the experience is universal. Some anthropologists point out that even before humans, animals were already getting tipsy. Elephants, monkeys, and birds have been observed eating overripe fruit until they stumble. Maybe we just inherited the instinct. After all, fermentation is nature's invitation to lose control, an evolutionary nudge toward pleasure in a world otherwise ruled by survival. Your tribe begins to experiment. Someone stores leftover fruit mash in a carved-out gourd, noticing it bubbles overnight. Another adds wild honey and grain, and the result? Stronger, sweeter, more potent. You're not just drinking anymore, you're crafting. The first primitive brewers are born, though they don't yet know the science behind their magic. When dawn creeps in, you wake to a pounding head. Your mouth feels dry as sand, your thoughts fuzzy. And just like that, the human race invents not only drinking, but also regret. As you trudge toward a nearby stream, scooping cold water to your lips, you swear you'll never touch the stuff again. You mean it for about a day. Then someone finds a new batch of fermented berries and the cycle begins anew. There's a strange comfort in knowing that this pattern, joy, laughter, headache, repeat, has echoed through millennia. From prehistoric fruit piles to modern nightclubs, it's the same ancient impulse, to loosen the mind, to forget time, to chase warmth in cold darkness. And as you glance around at your tribe still snoozing in the grass, snoring softly, you can't help but smile. Humanity may still be in its infancy, but one thing is already certain: people love getting wasted. You wake again, this time to a landscape that's changed. Thousands of years have rolled past like morning fog lifting over the plains. You're standing near a river, a wide, glinting one that snakes through a land of reeds and clay. The air smells of earth and barley. Somewhere nearby, water sloshes softly into carved vats, and laughter echoes from a gathering of people wearing linen skirts and dusty sandals. You've arrived in Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates, the birthplace of writing, cities, cities, and most importantly tonight, beer. The first thing you notice is how seriously everyone takes their drink. This isn't just fermented fruit anymore. This is civilization's first recipe brewed with purpose. The Sumerians have turned barley and water into something that bubbles, nourishes, and numbs. A drink so sacred they dedicate a goddess to it, Ninkasi. She's not just a brewer, she's a divine bartender, and her hymn, the Hymn to Ninkasi, is one of the oldest recorded texts in human history. Imagine that, a song about beer written in cuneiform, thousands of years before Shakespeare or Homer ever picked up a pen. You walk closer to the group. They sit around wide clay jars half buried in the ground, each sealed with a lid of straw. Every so often, someone lifts the lid and dips in a long reed straw to sip from the liquid below. It's cloudy, thick, and smells faintly of bread and sour grain. You take a cautious sip. It's warm, tangy, a little bitter, but there's comfort in it too, like chewing liquid bread. The drink fills your stomach quickly, and you can almost feel the nutrients sinking into your bloodstream. You realize this isn't just about getting drunk, it's about survival. In a world where water can make you sick, beer is safe. Boiled, fermented, and sealed, it's the ancient equivalent of bottled water with a bonus buzz. Historians still argue whether the desire for beer led to farming itself, you recall, as one man proudly pours a new batch from a clay jug. Some researchers think humans began cultivating barley not for bread, but for beer. If true, then the entire agricultural revolution, settling down, building cities, inventing writing, might have started because someone wanted another round. Humanity owes its civilization to happy hour. As the sun sinks lower, the scene shifts from practical to celebratory. The workers, priests, and merchants gather for a feast. The aroma of roasted goat mingles with incense and the musty sweetness of fermenting grain. Drummers beat slow rhythms while women clap and chant hymns. You feel yourself drifting with the rhythm, lulled by the sound of life moving in cycles, sowing, harvesting, brewing, drinking, and doing it all again. Someone beside you, half smiling, recites a line from the hymn to Ninkasi, translated roughly. You are the one who waters the malt set on the ground, the noble dogs guard the grain. You are the one who bakes the beer bread in the big oven and puts in order the piles of hulled grain. It's not poetry in the modern sense, but it's beautiful. Every word drips with reverence. This isn't mere alcohol, it's nourishment, ritual, connection to the divine. You notice that the beer here isn't filtered. Bits of grain and yeast float in every gulp. It's more porridge than pint, and that's fine. People drink it with spoons or through straws to avoid swallowing too much grit. Children drink it. Laborers drink it. Even priests drink it, though in moderation, or so they claim. You suspect some temples were far rowdier than the official hymns suggest. A man in a conical hat, the local brew master, shows you his method. First, he bakes loaves of barley bread, then crumbles them into water to ferment. Days later, the mixture bubbles like a swamp. He tastes it, nods, and declares it ready for the gods and everyone else. It's communal work, shared reward, and sacred offering all at once. The beer is even used as currency. Wages for laborers come in liquid form. Workers building ziggurats, those towering temples to the gods, might be paid 3 liters a day. A fair deal, really. Imagine building skyscrapers while being perpetually tipsy. You start to think maybe history isn't as grim as it sounds. And then there are the festivals. Whole towns empty into the streets. The air rings with music, bodies swaying in sync. You see women crowned with reeds, men carrying jugs and laughing under the stars. It's messy and joyous, a reminder that humans have always sought to dissolve the boundaries between ordinary and divine, between person and crowd. At one point, a priest spills his drink and mutters something about bad omens. You laugh quietly, some things never change. Even back then, spilling your beer felt like an insult to fate. You watch as a group of older women stir the next batch. The smell is thick and comforting. Their hands move with memory, their motions steady, practiced, timeless. You realize that brewing isn't just chemistry, it's tradition passed from one generation to the next, written not on tablets but in muscle and repetition. As the stars prick the dark sky, you sit back and let the hum of the city lull you. The buzz in your head is soft, like the low hum of a clay pot cooling. You're not just drinking beer, you're sipping history, the distilled patience of farmers and priests who turned grain into culture. One scholar once called Mesopotamian beer liquid bread, and as you watch a young child take a careful sip from his mother's bowl, you see how literal that phrase is. It's sustenance with spirit, food that makes you feel both fed and free. By the time the night deepens, the city's lights flicker like embers. The priests retire to their temples, the farmers to their huts. You stay by the river where the faint smell of yeast still clings to the air. Civilization hums softly around you, and somewhere in the dark, a frog croaks in rhythm to the distant drums. You take one last sip and smile. From rotting fruit to sacred brew, humanity's thirst has already evolved, but its purpose hasn't. It's still about gathering, sharing, forgetting the hard edges of life for a while. As the water laps gently against the muddy shore, you realize something profound. Beer didn't just quench thirst, it built community, and perhaps in its gentle haze the first glimmers of peace. The world spins forward again, faster this time, thousands of years passing in the blink of an eye. Dust becomes sand, sand becomes gold, and you find yourself beneath a blazing sun that paints the landscape in amber light. You hear the murmur of water, the shuffle of sandals, and the deep, rhythmic chant of workers hauling stone. Welcome to ancient Egypt, a place where beer is more than just a drink. It's the bloodstream of the kingdom itself. You squint at the horizon, where the great pyramids shimmer in the heat haze. Men and women move like ants hauling limestone blocks, weaving reeds, stirring great vats of something that smells unmistakably yeasty. You follow the scent and find it dozens of wide clay vessels bubbling with a familiar froth. Beer again, but smoother, thicker, creamier. The Egyptians have mastered the art of brewing. You can almost hear a modern hipster sighing in admiration. Here, beer isn't a luxury, it's life. Every worker gets paid in henket, the Egyptian word for beer. Rations come daily, several jugs per person depending on the task. It fuels the laborers who build temples and tombs, it comforts the poor, and it's even offered to the gods. You watch a priest pour a measure of beer onto an altar, murmuring thanks to Hathor, goddess of love, music, and appropriately enough, inebriation. You dip a wooden ladle into one of the vats and taste the frothy liquid. It's warm and sweet with hints of date and honey. It's not filtered, it's more like liquid bread pudding. And yet, it goes down easily, sliding into your stomach like sunlight in liquid form. The brewery itself is a marvel. Women work in rows, grinding barley, soaking loaves, and stirring the mash in massive ceramic pots. The air hums with quiet conversation, punctuated by laughter. In a world where death and labor hover close, this place feels alive, bubbling with yeast, laughter, and life. Historians still argue whether beer here was more sacred or practical. The truth, as you quickly realize, is that it's both. The Egyptians saw no difference between the spiritual and the physical. Drinking beer wasn't merely about pleasure, it was about balance, harmony, and offering thanks to the forces that made life bearable. Some of the oldest records describe how brewing was a divine gift. According to one myth, beer literally saved humanity. The story goes like this. The sun god Ra sent his daughter Sekhmet, a fierce lion-headed goddess, to punish humans for disobedience. But she became too bloodthirsty, threatening to destroy everyone. To stop her, Ra ordered vats of beer to be dyed red and poured across the desert. Sekhmet, thinking it was blood, drank it all. Until she grew dizzy and fell asleep, her rage forgot. Humanity was spared. In other words, beer once saved the world from annihilation. You watch a festival in honor of Hathor and Sekhmet unfold. Men beat drums, women dance with sistrums, metal rattles that chime like silver rain. Jugs of beer pass from hand to hand and soon laughter fills the air. You're caught in the rhythm, swaying with the crowd. Somewhere between the chanting and the heat, you start to feel it, the same ancient pulse that beats through every culture that's ever brewed. Nearby, nobles recline in shaded courtyards, sipping wine imported from distant vineyards. Egypt's elite prefer grapes to grain, and wine becomes a status symbol. You catch a whiff of it, sharp, sweet, a little decadent. For them, beer is for the workers, wine is for the chosen, yet even the richest among them secretly enjoy a frothy cup now and then. The tomb paintings prove it, scenes of banquets where both beer and wine flow endlessly, servants refilling golden cups while musicians play lutes and harps. You slip into one of those feasts. The air is thick with perfume and roasted duck, honeyed figs, and incense smoke that curls like ghostly ribbons toward the ceiling. A nobleman raises his cup and toasts the afterlife, his words slurred but grand. To forever joy, to eternal harvests, he declares. Everyone cheers, spilling drink onto polished limestone floors. Somewhere in the corner, a scribe watches with a bemused expression, recording every detail on a scroll. You wonder if he's silently judging them, or maybe just hoping someone spills their cup close enough for him to catch a sip. The Egyptians were meticulous record keepers. Thanks to them, we know the recipes for their beer, their wine, and even their hangover cures. One papyrus suggests a morning drink of celery and honey to restore balance after a long night. You make a mental note. It probably doesn't work, but it sounds delicious. The night deepens and the feast grows rowdier. Musicians play faster, dancers move wilder, laughter rises higher. You find yourself leaning against a cool column, feeling that familiar buzz behind your eyes. The same euphoria that once made cavemen giggle now binds nobles and workers alike. Civilization has changed everything except the feeling. In a quiet corner, an elderly brewer stirs a new batch under torchlight. She hums softly, her hands steady despite her years. The yeast remembers, she says when you ask why she stirs so gently. It's alive, treat it kindly and it gives you joy. You nod, realizing that beneath all the grandeur, all the myths and monuments, Egypt runs on the quiet patience of people like her, those who feed the living and honor the dead through the same golden drink. As dawn bleeds over the desert, the workers rise again, heads heavy, limbs sore, but spirits high. They take their morning ration, smiling as the warm brew fills their bellies. The pyramids will rise one stone at a time, fueled by barley and determination. And as you stand there, watching the sun climb over the Nile, you can't help but laugh softly. Humanity has come a long way from rotting fruit, but the goal remains the same: to find comfort in a cup, to take the edge off a hard day, to raise a toast to the miracle of being alive. The desert light fades and reforms into something cooler, softer, a sky of pale marble and sea breeze. The Nile melts into another sea altogether, one rimmed with olive trees and echoing with laughter. You've drifted into Greece now, sometime around the 5th century BCE, when the world smelled of salt, figs, and philosophy. The first thing you notice isn't the view, though, it's the sound. Dozens of men reclining on couches, speaking all at once in rolling musical tones, punctuated by bursts of laughter and the clinking of pottery. This, you realize, is a symposium, the original drinking party. The word literally means to drink together. And as you step into the room, sandals squeaking against mosaic floors, you can feel the electricity of it: wine, conversation, and wit swirling together like a heady perfume. You're handed a cup, a kylix wide and shallow, painted with red figures that grin up at you as you tilt it. The wine inside is deep, almost black, and the host immediately mixes it with water, 3 parts water to 1 part wine. Because here's the twist: Greeks considered it barbaric to drink wine straight. Only the uncivilized Persians, Thracians, and those scary people north of the Aegean drank it pure. The Greeks prided themselves on moderation, though their definition of it is flexible. You take a sip, it's sharp, fragrant with herbs and honey, surprisingly light. Around you, philosophers and poets debate virtue, justice, and whether love or wisdom is the greater path to immortality. Someone quotes Socrates, another mocks him. You half listen, half drift in the candlelight, your mind buzzing not from the wine, but from the strange joy of being surrounded by minds as vivid as this. Across the room, a musician plucks at a lyre, setting a gentle rhythm. A young man tosses a splash of wine onto the floor in honor of Dionysus, the god of revelry, ecstasy, and divine madness. His statue stands in the corner, half smiling, half smirking, as though he knows exactly how the night will end. Historians still argue whether symposiums were more intellectual or indulgent, but it's clear they were both. For the Greeks, drinking was an art form. The host, called the symposiarch, decided how strong the wine would be and how fast the cups would circulate. Drink too little and you were dull, too much and you were a fool. The trick was to stay balanced, wise enough to argue, drunk enough to laugh. As the evening deepens, the atmosphere shifts from serious to playful. Someone starts a game called katabos, where you fling the dregs of your wine at a target, usually a small disc floating in a bowl of water. You miss by a mile, splattering the man beside you, who laughs so hard he chokes. No one cares, it's part of the fun. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Your inner voice jokes, recalling Egypt. Yeah, you'd probably need it here too if you party this long. The host claps and servants refill the jugs, craters from which everyone's cups are drawn. The wine glints red in the lamplight. Someone begins to sing, a soft, haunting hymn to Dionysus. I will praise the one who leads men into joy, whose vines twine through the earth. You close your eyes for a moment and feel the vibration of the words hum in your chest. And then, like clockwork, the evening tips. The laughter gets louder, the arguments sillier. One man insists he can outdrink Hercules, another starts reciting bad poetry about love lost to the sea. You can't tell whether they're philosophers or just men looking for a reason to stay awake. In a corner, you spot Plato himself, or maybe someone who just thinks he's Plato, leaning forward, speaking in that calm, deliberate tone. He's arguing that wine helps strip away false pretenses, revealing a person's true nature. When the tongue loosens, he says, the heart speaks. You nod, half drunk and half enlightened, because somehow that makes perfect sense. Later, the room dims. Oil lamps gutter low. The floor is sticky with spilled wine and the air smells of olives, smoke, and something ancient, something human. Outside, the crickets sing. Inside, a few stragglers are still talking, eyes heavy, words slurred. You lean back against a cushion, your head floating. For a moment, you drift into memory. Cavemen laughing at fermented fruit, Sumerians singing hymns to beer, Egyptians pouring honeyed brews for the gods. And now here in this polished marble world, the same ritual continues, only with more vocabulary and better pottery. The same impulse, connection, joy, forgetting the weight of the world for a few hours, echoes through it all. The Greeks even had a word for that moment when the mind lifts out of itself, when boundaries blur between mortal and divine. Ecstasis, ecstasy. You feel it now, a slow dissolve into the hum of the room. Wine was their way of chasing it, believing that within drunkenness lay truth, or at least a glimpse of it. You blink and the symposium dissolves. You're outside now, under a moon so clear it looks like you could drink it. The sea whispers nearby, and somewhere faintly you hear laughter still. The Greeks would have called this perfect: the night, the wine, the fleeting beauty of conversation that fades by dawn. And maybe they were right, because as your thoughts soften and your eyes begin to close, you realize something quietly profound. People have always been looking for ways to feel more alive, even if it means forgetting themselves for a while. When you open your eyes again, the world has shifted once more. The laughter of philosophers fades into the deeper roar of 1,000 feasts echoing through marble halls. The air smells of roasted meat, crushed grapes, and burning oil lamps. You're standing in ancient Rome, a city that hums with power, pride, and far too many people drinking far too much wine. The streets buzz like a living organism. Vendors shout over each other, soldiers swagger past with cups in hand, and noblemen glide through the chaos in togas so white they practically glow. Somewhere in this city, an emperor lounges on a couch, drinking from a cup carved of solid gold, while a baker a few blocks away gulps from a chipped clay mug. But it's all the same wine, diluted, spiced, and indispensable. You follow the sound of lyres and laughter into a triclinium, a Roman dining room, and instantly you're swept into the heart of a banquet. Reclining guests stretch out on couches, propped up on one elbow, draped in silk and arrogance. Servants move between them, pouring wine into goblets, sprinkling petals on the floor, and whispering reminders not to choke on their grapes. A man with a laurel crown greets you warmly and insists you sit. "Tonight," he says, "we celebrate Bacchus." You glance toward a statue of the wine god in the corner, half draped, half grinning, entirely unbothered. Historians still argue whether Roman banquets were about food or about showing off, but as your host waves for another amphora to be opened, you suspect it's the latter. The Romans didn't just drink wine, they engineered it. They spiced it with honey, herbs, even seawater. They mixed it with perfumes, pepper, or myrrh, claiming it improved digestion. You doubt that. The servants bring out a massive bowl, the crater's Roman cousin, filled with wine and water. Everyone knows that drinking it straight is for fools. But as the night goes on, the mixture gets stronger, the laughter louder. A poet begins reciting verses he can't remember halfway through. A senator boasts about his villa. A woman in jewels tosses dates into the air and catches them with regal precision. It's chaos with manners. You take a sip. The wine burns sweetly down your throat, a trace of spice lingering. Someone explains that this batch came from the hills of Campania, aged in amphorae sealed with pine resin. The gods themselves would drink this, he says. You nod politely, though you're pretty sure the gods would prefer cold water at this point. Still, there's something magnetic about it all, the way pleasure and order intertwine. The Romans believed moderation was a virtue temperantia, yet their parties were studies in glorious contradiction. They preached restraint, then held feasts so lavish they defied logic. They built empires by day and drowned their worries in wine by night. As the evening ripens, someone brings out a platter of oysters. Another announces a drinking game, throwing dice to decide who must drain a cup. Laughter rings out. You watch as one man tries to stand and promptly sits back down again, eyes unfocused. Across the room, a philosopher sighs and mutters that truth is found in wine, a saying the Romans loved, in vino veritas. You've heard that before in the Greek halls, but here it feels different, less about divine revelation, more about letting the masks slip. Rome is a city of masks, of ambition and ceremony, and maybe wine is the only thing that cuts through it. Outside, the noise of the streets grows wilder. The festival of Bacchus is in full swing. You step out into the open air where torches flare and drums pound. Men in ivy wreaths dance in circles, women shout praises to the god of ecstasy, and somewhere a flute wails in the night. It's both beautiful and unsettling, a kind of collective surrender to chaos. And yet, even in the madness, you spot something almost tender. A pair of old men share a jug in silence, smiling faintly. A child giggles at the sight of bubbles forming in a cup. A stray dog laps spilled wine from the cobblestones, tail wagging. The Romans were masters of contradiction. Their empire thrived on order but longed for release. Wine became their balance, a ritual of control and indulgence, intellect and impulse. Even the emperors weren't immune. Pliny the Elder once wrote about a rare wine so strong it could light a fire in the belly. Nero, of course, took that metaphor too literally. Later, you wander into a quieter courtyard. A mosaic glitters under lamplight, Bacchus riding a leopard, vines curling around him. Beside it sits a scholar, sipping from a bronze cup. People think we drink to forget, he says softly, but no, Bacchus helps us remember that we are mortal, that we must taste life before it ends. You think about that, maybe he's right. Maybe the Romans, with all their excess, understood something fundamental, that to live fully, one must occasionally lose balance. Back in the banquet hall, the host raises his goblet. To Bacchus, to Rome, to tomorrow if it comes. Everyone cheers, wine splashing onto robes and marble alike. The floor gleams with spilt joy. As the night wanes, you find yourself half asleep against a cool pillar, lulled by distant music. You picture all the empires that have come before, Sumer, Egypt, Greece, and realize that every civilization has its drink, its ritual of release. The Romans just perfected the art of pretending it was civilized. When you next open your eyes, the marble and mosaics of Rome have melted into the soft flicker of candlelight and the low hum of chanting. You find yourself in a medieval monastery, somewhere deep in the heart of Europe, where stone walls hold the chill of centuries and the air smells faintly of ink, beeswax, and brewing malt. It is dawn, and the monks have already prayed. Their voices still echo in the vaulted hall, low, rhythmic, like the turning of the earth itself. The monastery is alive, but not in the bustling way of a city. Here, everything breathes in silence, every footstep matters, every motion is deliberate. You follow the sound of trickling water and the faint, comforting aroma of yeast. It leads you through arched corridors and into a cool, dimly lit cellar. There, rows upon rows of wooden barrels stretch into the darkness, bound in iron hoops, each one marked with Latin letters and faded dates. A monk greets you with a kind smile. His hands are rough, his robe patched, his eyes clear. "Welcome, traveler," he whispers, as if afraid to disturb the peace. "You've come at a good time, the ale is ready." He hands you a small wooden cup. The drink inside is cloudy, golden brown, and surprisingly warm. When you sip, it tastes of bread and honey, of earth and stone, with just enough bitterness to balance the sweetness. It is simple but alive, a far cry from the perfumed wines of Rome. This is beer as it once was, unfiltered, unrefined, and sacred. The monk leads you to a small window overlooking the herb garden. Beyond it, rows of hops climb up poles, their green cones swaying gently in the morning breeze. "We grow them for preservation," he says softly, "but some say they make the soul lighter too," he chuckles. "Perhaps that's why we use them so generously." In the Middle Ages, beer wasn't a luxury, it was a necessity. Water was often unsafe to drink, so even children and priests drank ale daily. But here, behind monastery walls, brewing became an art form. It wasn't just about quenching thirst, it was devotion through craftsmanship. Each monk brewed with care, measuring not just ingredients but intention. You watch as they work. One stirs the mash in a great copper kettle, steam rising like incense. Another weighs barley on a small brass scale. A third reads from a parchment, carefully noting the proportions. "Too little heat and it sours," one murmurs. "Too much and it loses its grace." You realize this is more than chemistry, it's contemplation. Every act here, from prayer to brewing, is meditation. The monk who gave you your cup smiles again. "Our abbey has brewed since the time of Charlemagne," he tells you. "The emperor himself ordered monks to make good ale for health and holiness," he said. He grins. "A wise command, wouldn't you say?" You laugh quietly, it's hard to disagree. In the corner, an elderly brother hums softly as he seals another barrel with wax. His voice wavers like a candle flame. "Do you know why we brew?" he asks without looking up. "Because it reminds us of life. Grain dies to give us bread, yeast consumes sugar and creates spirit. Even in decay there is renewal." His words hang in the cool air, and you find yourself thinking of ancient Egypt again, the barley offerings, the sacred foam of the Nile. The chain of humanity stretches unbroken. From the riverbanks of Thebes to the cloisters of Burgundy, people have always found divinity in fermentation. You take another sip, slower this time. The taste deepens, richer with each breath. The monk nods approvingly. "Good," he says, "you are tasting patience." Later, you join them in the refectory for their morning meal. The table is long and plain. Bowls of pottage, rough bread, and jugs of ale line the center. A bell chimes and the monks bow their heads in silence. Then, with quiet grace, they eat. No words, no laughter, only the sound of spoons, the creak of benches, and the occasional sip of beer. It is the simplest of feasts, yet it feels profound. You understand now that for these men, drinking is not indulgence but gratitude. Every swallow is a prayer for the harvest, the rain, the yeast that turned grain into life again. Outside, the bells begin to toll for midday prayer. The monks rise, leaving half-full cups behind. You follow one as he walks through the cloister garden, murmuring psalms. The wind carries the scent of barley and thyme. "Do you ever drink to forget?" you ask him quietly. He shakes his head. "No," he replies, "we drink to remember that all things, even joy, must be savored slowly." The sun climbs higher. You sit beside the stone well, watching the light shift through the vines, and you think of how this quiet devotion shaped the world. These monks would go on to refine brewing, to create the first recorded recipes, to build the foundations of what would become modern beer. Without them, the great breweries of Europe might never have existed. You raise your wooden cup one last time, the foam catching the sunlight. "To patience," you whisper. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings again, and you swear you can almost hear the barley fields whispering back. When you next blink, the monastery bells fade into the thrum of a distant storm. You're no longer surrounded by stone and silence, but by timber, laughter, and the thick, smoky scent of yeast and wood smoke. A tavern roof creaks overhead, and a dog snores beside the hearth. The Middle Ages have spilled outward, beyond cloisters and prayer halls, into the rough, earthy hands of everyday folk. Outside, muddy streets glisten under flickering lanterns. You can hear the muffled sounds of horses clopping by, merchants shouting in the drizzle, and the rhythmic slap of someone kneading dough. Inside, the alewife, the true queen of this world, leans over a bubbling cauldron. Her sleeves are rolled up to her elbows, her hair tied in a cloth, and she smells faintly of malt and smoke. She stirs with a wooden paddle long enough to reach your shoulder. Her arms are strong, her eyes sharper than a bishop's glare. She's not a nun, but her kitchen is no less sacred. Here, over open fire, Europe's thirst is met not by monks in Latin, but by women who know the rhythm of yeast better than any psalm. Sit, love, she says, waving you toward a rickety stool. The brew nearly done. You obey. The air hums with heat and steam, the walls blackened by centuries of brewing smoke. The alewife ladles a small cup from the kettle, still warm and slightly cloudy. When you sip, it's alive, sweet and grassy, with a faint bite that tingles on the tongue. Not bad, eh? She grins. Brewed it with oats and a touch of rosemary, keeps the belly warm. You smile, realizing she's not only serving ale but survival. In these medieval towns, ale is more reliable than water, and its brewing, done mostly by women, keeps whole communities alive. Goodwives, they were called, though many bore the title brewster or alewife. They brewed in their homes, selling their ales from wooden benches out front, marked by a bundle of straw, a universal sign that drink was ready. You glance around the tavern. Men and women sit shoulder to shoulder, sharing mugs carved from horn or clay. Someone strums a lute, someone else snores with his head on the table. It's messy, warm, and utterly human. Outside, the rain patters harder. The alewife pours another round and tells you stories as she works. Once I brewed a batch so strong the Lord's steward fell asleep in his soup, she says, laughing. He paid double when he woke up, said it was worth every drop. Her laughter is contagious. She moves like someone born to chaos, slinging mugs, dodging dogs, swatting drunks with the back of her hand when they reach too far. She is the heartbeat of her neighborhood, keeping spirits high and thirsts quenched. Yet as your eyes wander the rafters, you notice something else, strange charms and dried herbs hanging in bunches. For luck, you ask. She nods. Luck, aye, and for keeping the brew from souring. She leans in, voice dropping. You can't trust yeast alone, there are spirits in the brew too, best not anger them. There's that ancient line again, between science and superstition, blurred and bubbling in a cauldron of ale. Historians still argue, you murmur to yourself, whether these charms were harmless tradition or proto-chemistry, little rituals that accidentally helped fermentation. The alewife doesn't care for theories. All I know, she says, is that it works. The door bangs open with a gust of wind. A man in a wool cloak staggers in, drenched and grinning. Ale, Margaret, he shouts, the kind that makes a man forget his debts. Then you'll want the cheap stuff, she replies, not missing a beat. The room erupts in laughter. You can't help smiling. It's hard to imagine a world where joy doesn't come with a little alcohol in it. But this joy, rough, smoky, communal, is fragile. Change is brewing outside these wooden walls. Later that night, when the tavern quiets and the fire burns low, the alewife tells you about her fears. They're saying the church will start taxing us, she mutters. Monks think they brew better, nobles think they can sell it dearer, but me, I think they're just jealous. And perhaps she's right. Over the coming centuries, laws and guilds will push women like her out of brewing entirely. Her art, once domestic, sacred, and feminine, will be swallowed by institutions. The monks will perfect the recipes, men will take the credit, alewives will fade into the margins of history, leaving behind little more than whispers and stereotypes. You look into her tired eyes. She doesn't know she's witnessing the end of her own era. But tonight, she's still the master of the brew kettle, and her laughter still fills the room like rising yeast. She offers you one last drink before bed. For dreams, she says, and you take it, feeling warmth flood through you like candlelight. You drift upstairs to a small room under the eaves, where the roof leaks slightly but the straw mattress smells of dried lavender. The rain outside has softened to a hush. From below, you can still hear the alewife humming as she cleans her kettles, her song low and steady, as old as the yeast itself. You fall asleep to that rhythm, the ancient, eternal song of fermentation and fire. And as you fade, you realize, this was never just about getting wasted. It was about staying alive, staying connected, and finding small comfort in a hard, hungry world. When morning light returns, it isn't the soft glow of a medieval hearth that greets you, but the blinding shimmer of sunlight bouncing off the open sea. The air is sharp with salt. Wooden timbers creak beneath your feet. Somewhere above, gulls cry and ropes groan under strain. You're aboard a ship, a great heaving vessel cutting through the Atlantic, its sails fat with wind and its hold stacked with barrels. You steady yourself on the deck, clutching a rope as a sailor stomps by, bare feet slapping the wet boards. He flashes you a grin, his teeth, what's left of them, gleam gold in the sun. Morning, he says, rum rations coming soon. Rum, even the word seems to taste warm and dangerous. You've sailed straight into the age of discovery, or perhaps more accurately, the age of drunken discovery. From the Caribbean to the coasts of Africa and beyond, alcohol has become both fuel and fortune for the empires of Europe. Below deck, it smells like salt, sweat, and sweet molasses, the syrupy byproduct of sugarcane. You follow the scent to a small, dim corner of the hold where sailors sit in a circle around a barrel. One dips a ladle and fills tin mugs for the others. "To the Queen!" someone shouts, and the rest cheer before downing the amber liquid in one gulp. You take a cautious sip. The rum burns hot and fast like liquid fire. It's not refined, nothing like the monk's ale or the alewife's oat brew, but it has its own savage poetry. You cough and the sailor beside you slaps your back. "Aye," he laughs, "it bites, but it keeps the belly warm and the sea out of your bones." He's not wrong. Rum, as you'll come to learn, was survival in a cup. You climb back on deck, your head pleasantly buzzing, and watch as the crew hauls ropes and scrubs decks. Each man carries a strength born of necessity, but beneath it, a weariness lingers. Life at sea is brutal, and their daily tot of rum, issued by command, serves as reward, medicine, and sedative all at once. The tradition began with necessity. Water spoiled quickly at sea, turning foul and dangerous. Beer went flat, wine soured, but rum, distilled, potent, and nearly indestructible, endured. It became the sailor's lifeline. And as empires grew fat on sugarcane plantations in the Caribbean, rum became their golden child. The triangle trade, historians later called it, manufactured goods from Europe traded for enslaved people in Africa, sold in the Americas for sugar, which became rum, then sent back to Europe to start the cycle anew. It's a sobering truth, one that tastes bitter under the sweetness. The same drink that warmed shivering sailors also lined the coffers of a brutal trade. Humanity's thirst, it seems, often has a shadow. A storm begins to gather on the horizon. The captain, a broad-shouldered man with a weathered face, shouts orders as waves rise higher. You grip the railing and hold on as rain lashes down and lightning splits the sky. The ship heaves violently, barrels crashing below. One bursts open, spilling rum across the floorboards, and a few sailors scramble to save what they can. Even in chaos, they know what matters. When the storm finally passes, the sea gleams calm and endless once more. The captain joins you by the mast, wiping rain from his brow. "We live by the sea," he says softly, "and sometimes we drown by it. The rum, it reminds us we're still alive." You nod, still feeling the roll of the waves in your knees. Days pass. The ship reaches the Caribbean, where palm trees sway along sugar-rich shores. You disembark, and the air instantly changes, hotter, heavier, buzzing with life. The scent of molasses clings to everything. Workers move among the cane fields, their faces hidden under wide hats. In the distance, great mills grind and smoke. A plantation overseer greets you with forced cheer. "Fine day for a distillation," he says, gesturing proudly toward the boiling vats. The heat is unbearable, the steam thick as fog. Sugarcane juice boils and darkens into molasses, which is then fermented and distilled into the dark, golden liquid that will sail back across the Atlantic. You taste a drop from the still. It's strong enough to make your head spin. The overseer laughs. "That's the New World's blessing," he says, "or curse, depending on how much you drink." And just like that, the story of getting wasted evolves again, from sacred ale to social glue to weapon of trade and empire. The same human impulse that once made the Sumerians sing to Ninkasi now drives ships across oceans and crowns kings in golden rum. But alcohol's journey doesn't end at the ports. As ships sail home, they carry not just cargo but culture. Rum spreads to the colonies, brandy rules in France, gin brews in London. The spirits multiply, each one taking on the flavor of its people, their fears, their hungers, their celebrations. You sit on the beach that evening, watching the sun sink into the Caribbean Sea. The waves hiss softly against the sand, the air thick with salt and sugar. You take another sip of rum, and for a moment, everything slows, the wind, the tide, even your own heartbeat. The sailors laugh around a bonfire, telling tall tales of mermaids and sea monsters, their mugs raised high. A parrot squawks from a nearby palm. Someone begins to sing, off-key but heartfelt. You stare at your cup and realize that for all its history, its darkness, its pain, its sweetness, alcohol has always been this too, a way to bring people together under a vast and uncaring sky. You raise your mug to the sea, to the sailors, to the ghosts in the rum. And as the firelight flickers across their faces, you feel something ancient stir in you again. The same spark that drove cave dwellers to eat overripe fruit, monks to perfect ale, and explorers to toast under the stars. The eternal desire to taste something beyond survival. To feel, if only for a moment, that warm and golden illusion of being infinite. You wake with the faint sting of sea salt still on your lips, but the air around you has changed. It's colder now, heavier, carrying the thick dampness of coal smoke and fog. When you open your eyes, the Caribbean sunlight is gone. In its place, a grey London dawn seeps through grime-covered windows. The sound of church bells echoes faintly beyond the clatter of carts and the shouts of vendors. You're standing in the middle of 18th century London, a city that's growing faster than it can breathe. The streets are narrow and filthy, the air a blend of soot, sewage, and desperation. You step carefully over puddles that might be rain or something worse. And then, drifting through the air, you catch another scent, sharp, sweet, unmistakable. Gin. You follow it down an alley, past ragged laundry lines and shivering children until you find a low doorway lit by a sputtering oil lamp. A crudely painted sign above it reads simply, Gin Shop. Inside, the world is blurred and dreamlike. The air is hot, the walls stained from candle smoke and the floor sticky beneath your boots. A woman with hollow eyes ladles a clear liquid from a barrel into tin cups, her hands shaking slightly. She doesn't ask names, she doesn't need to. You sip cautiously, it's gin, but not the crisp, elegant kind that clinks in modern glasses. This is rough, almost poisonous. It smells like turpentine and tastes like regret. You cough and the woman smirks faintly. First one's always the worst, she says, wiping her hands on her apron. You've stumbled into Gin Lane, the most infamous street in London's history. During the early 1700s, the government encouraged distilling gin as a way to use up surplus grain. They didn't foresee what would follow, an entire population slowly drowning in cheap spirits. At its peak, London had over 7,000 gin shops, one for every few dozen people. Mothers gave gin to crying bobbies to keep them quiet. Workers drank it to forget hunger. The city drank until it blurred. You walk further down the street. Everywhere you look, life teeters between comedy and tragedy. A man sings to a lamppost, his hat tipped rakishly askew. A woman leans from a window, laughing wildly at nothing. In a corner, a small group of musicians plays a tune that's half dance, half dirge. A cart rattles by carrying barrels marked Mother's Ruin. You overhear someone mutter that the name fits. Too many mothers, too many children ruined by gin's cheap comfort. You duck into another tavern, this one even darker. Inside, a man with soot-blackened hands is drawing crude tattoos on another's arm with a needle and a bowl of gin. Sterilizes it, he says with a wink. You're not so sure. In the corner, an artist sketches by candlelight. He's young, intense, eyes full of fire. His name, you'll later learn, is William Hogarth. The drawings on his page will become his famous prints Gin Lane and Beer Street, one a picture of chaos and despair, the other of hearty, wholesome drinkers. Gin, to him, is the devil's brew, beer, the patriotic cure. You can almost see it forming in his mind. The slumped woman on the steps, her baby slipping from her arms, the crumbling houses, the skeletal figures fighting over gin-soaked pennies. Historians still argue, you whisper, whether Hogarth exaggerated or simply painted what everyone already knew. Outside, the rain begins to fall, cold and constant. You pull your coat tighter and watch it drip from the eaves, carrying soot down the walls in black rivers. Further along, you find a different kind of establishment, a more respectable gin palace, all glass and mirrors, where gentlemen sip from delicate glasses instead of pewter cups. A sign above the bar promises refined London dry. The same drink, reborn. Gin, it seems, has learned how to dress itself up. A thin man beside you raises his glass and smiles. They said it'd ruin us, he says, now it pays the rent. You look at him, his fine coat, his steady gaze, and wonder how quickly sin turns into style. The barkeep, polishing a glass, adds quietly, it's never the drink, it's the desperation. That truth lands heavier than the gin itself. As the century turns, reformers begin to fight back. New laws, taxes, moral campaigns, all aimed at controlling the city's intoxication. Slowly, gin fades from its feverish grip. The streets grow cleaner or at least quieter, but the damage remains. Etched into memory like soot into stone. You walk through the foggy twilight, your breath ghosting before you. The smell of gin lingers faintly in the air like a memory London can't quite wash away. It's strange, you think, how every age finds its own poison, and its own poetry to justify it. As you cross the Thames Bridge, a faint orange glow lights the skyline, the new century dawning, factories rising, revolutions brewing across the ocean. You take one last sip from the small glass you've been carrying since the tavern. It burns, but it's cleaner now, brighter somehow, a spirit reborn for a new world. You lean against the stone railing, the fog curling around you like breath, and think of all the places this story has been: monasteries, taverns, ships, empires, and how, no matter the century, people still raise their cups to the same invisible ache. To forget, to celebrate, to belong. The wind carries the faint echo of laughter from the far bank. You can't tell if it's joy or madness. Maybe in this city they've always been the same thing. You awaken not to fog or salt, but to the sharp clang of industry and the acrid smell of smoke that hangs heavy in the air. Welcome to 19th century London, the throbbing heart of the Industrial Revolution. Brick chimneys puncture the skyline, and the streets rumble with carts and the iron-laden wheels of steam engines. The air tastes like soot and coal dust, but beneath it all you catch that familiar scent: malted barley, hops, and yeast. You follow the smell into a bustling pub, the kind that hums with life and danger in equal measure. It's narrow, smoky, crowded with laborers from the factories who have just punched out from their grueling 12-hour shifts. Their faces are smudged with grime, their hands are blistered, their eyes, though tired, glint with mischief. Ale is the lifeblood here, stronger and more refined than the monk's centuries-old brews. Steam from freshly poured pints curls into your nostrils, thick with the scent of malt. You take a sip. It's hearty, warming, slightly bitter, and a little sweet, perfect for a soul worn down by smoke, sweat, and unending work. The pub is alive with chatter, laughter, and occasional arguments over cards or dice. Children sometimes sneak in at the edges, drinking watered-down beer, their cheeks flushed from both warmth and excitement. Alehouses have become hubs of community, survival, and entertainment. You notice a woman moving deftly between tables, carrying foaming jugs, calming squabbles, and trading witty remarks with the patrons. She is the matron of the pub, commanding respect with a raised eyebrow and an iron-strong voice. You remember the alewives of medieval Europe. This is their spiritual descendant, guiding the flow of drink and human energy with equal skill. Outside, the city grows ever louder. Factories belch smoke, horse-drawn wagons jostle for space, street musicians play ragged tunes for coins. Some men sip gin, a nod to the century's lingering vice, others prefer porter or stout, dark and heavy, offering warmth for long nights. The Industrial Revolution may have sped up life, but drink slows it back down, giving workers a temporary sanctuary from the grind. Historians still argue whether the pub culture created community or merely masked despair. But as you lean against the bar and watch the world swirl in frothy pints, you sense a little of both. Here, people laugh to survive, argue to feel alive, and toast to fleeting victories that feel eternal in the glow of lamplight. A young man near you sings a folk tune, slightly off-key, while the crowd joins in with claps and shouts. The rhythm pulses through you like the beat of a shared heartbeat. A group of men play skittles by the window, a stray dog laps up spilled ale, tail wagging. The scene is chaotic, messy, intoxicating in a way both literal and metaphorical. You overhear someone whisper about temperance movements sweeping the city. "They'll ruin the fun," another replies, laughter bubbling beneath his breath. Yet despite laws, pamphlets, and sermons, drink continues to thrive. Humanity, it seems, never tires of finding comfort in liquid courage, joy, or forgetfulness. You notice the transition from communal survival ale to brand-specific brews, the beginning of the commercialized beer market. Labels become important, marketing creeps into tavern life, and the seeds of modern drinking culture take root. Yet beneath it all, the human motive remains unchanged: connection, relief, and the faint illusion of transcendence in a frothy mug. As night falls, the pub grows louder. Firelight dances across walls blackened by centuries of smoke, illuminating faces flushed with warmth, laughter, and alcohol. You take a final sip of your ale, tasting the lineage of centuries. From Sumerian beer to Egyptian grog, Greek wine, Roman revelry, monastic patience, Caribbean rum, and medieval taverns, all converging here in this small, rickety pub. You step outside into the foggy, coal-choked streets where horse hooves echo against cobblestones. Somewhere nearby, a brass band plays a jaunty tune, and you realize the world keeps spinning, drink in hand, for survival, for joy, for defiance. And somewhere deep within, you understand. Humanity has been chasing the same thing for millennia: the warmth, the escape, the thrill of life distilled into liquid form. You wake again, this time to the buzz of gas lamps and the faint hiss of steam escaping from underground pipes. The world around you is early 20th century Europe, a continent perched precariously between old traditions and the dizzying speed of modernity. Cities hum with trams, automobiles, and chatter. And yet the scent of alcohol threads its way through the air, persistent, familiar, and impossible to ignore. You find yourself in a bustling cafe in Vienna. The interior is elegant, polished, filled with velvet chairs, polished wood, and mirrored walls. Men in tailored suits puff cigarettes, tapping their fingers lightly on the tables as they sip dark, bitter coffee mixed with a measure of rum or brandy. Women in flowing skirts laugh softly, their gloved hands cradling crystal glasses of wine or sherry. The cafe is alive, cultured, and intimate, a new kind of drinking culture where conversation flows as freely as the spirits. You watch as a man in a bowler hat meticulously stirs sugar and bitters into a glass. The bartender slides a small cocktail across the polished counter. This is the age of innovation when bartenders began experimenting with flavors, ice, and presentation. Cocktails are not just drinks, they are art, performance, and social signaling all at once. The cafe hums with a mix of intellect and indulgence. Writers debate philosophy over martinis. Artists sketch their dreams on napkins. Students sip schnapps between lectures, their laughter echoing across the tiled floors. Historians still argue whether this cafe culture helped fuel intellectual revolutions or simply provided a pleasant distraction, but the energy is undeniable. You take a sip of a small glass of punch. It's fruity, bright, and dangerous in its elegance, warming you from the inside. You realize how far drinking has evolved. From communal survival ale to wine at symposiums, from sailors' rum to gin-soaked streets, from industrial alehouses to these refined rooms where spirits mingle with ideas. Outside, the streets are alive with the first signs of motorized transport. Cars rattle past horse-drawn carts. Streetlights flicker against slick cobblestones. The city pulses with possibility and tension. Newsboys call out papers with headlines about global conflicts looming on the horizon. In the distance, a tram rattles over tracks, carrying passengers who clutch their flasks discreetly under coats and hats. You wander down an alley and find a dimly lit speakeasy tucked behind an unassuming door. Inside, jazz floats over the chatter. Bottles gleam on mirrored shelves. You hear the clink of ice, the hiss of soda, and the low murmur of flirtation. The Prohibition era is still a decade away in some places, but you sense the shadow of restriction shaping behavior even here. A young couple laughs over a shared cocktail. You notice how drink is no longer just survival or ritual, it's entertainment, rebellion, and social glue. The rules have changed. The motivations have multiplied. Alcohol now dances between necessity and indulgence, between pleasure and performance. You take a seat at the bar. The bartender, a tall man with slicked back hair, slides a smoky whiskey in front of you. He nods, acknowledging that the drinker's role is sacred. To experience, to engage, to participate in the eternal ritual of shared intoxication. The room swells with music, laughter, and the faint, persistent memory of centuries past. You can almost hear echoes of Sumerian hymns to Ninkasi, Greek symposiums, Roman banquets, monastic cellars, medieval taverns, and Caribbean ships, all converging into this moment. The centuries of humanity's desire distilled into one golden, amber, and ruby-hued mosaic of experience. Outside, the city shimmers with streetlights reflecting off wet pavements. You step into the night, feeling the pulse of modernity under your feet, carrying with it the collective memory of countless toasts, spills, and drunken confessions. Humanity has never stopped chasing that warmth, the temporary forgetting, the fleeting elevation, the communal embrace. And in this modern world, you understand something anew. The drive to drink, to celebrate, to escape, to connect is not just about spirits. It's about life itself, distilled into cups and shared across centuries. The morning opens not with fog or city smoke, but with the sharp buzz of neon and the faint vibration of engines on asphalt. You're now in mid-20th century America, somewhere between the hum of post-war optimism and the thrumming pulse of nightlife that stretches from smoky bars to neon-lit diners. The air smells of gasoline, fried food, and, faintly, whiskey. You wander down a bustling street, lined with diners, corner bars, and soda fountains, each window glowing with promise. Teenagers laugh on stoops, their sneakers scuffing the concrete. A jukebox thumps in the distance, and the rhythm carries like a heartbeat through the neighborhood. Men in fedora hats and women with curled hair sip from paper-wrapped bottles and tall glasses filled with pale amber liquids. You enter a corner bar, its polished wooden walls lined with brass taps. The bartender, a stocky man with a ready smile, wipes down the counter with a rag that's seen decades. "What'll it be?" he asks, nodding at the glowing bottles behind him. You gesture and he slides a glass of bourbon across the polished wood. The scent hits your nose first, vanilla, oak, and a hint of smoke. You inhale and take a cautious sip. It burns warmly, coats your throat, and settles into your chest like a slow, comforting sigh. Here, alcohol has evolved again. No longer purely a necessity, no longer just an art or social glue. It is entertainment, identity, rebellion, and reflection. The speakeasy era of the 1920s is past, but its legacy lingers. Whiskey and cocktails define culture, radio songs celebrate indulgence, and the local bars pulse with community. People gather not just to survive or celebrate, but to assert their place in a rapidly changing world. Historians still argue whether the post-war drinking boom was a reaction to hardship or a symptom of newfound prosperity. But you can see it in the faces of those around you. The relief of a long day's work, the camaraderie of shared experience, the thrill of a society that is freer, louder, and faster than any that came before. A couple dances near the jukebox, laughing as their shoes slide across the scuffed floor. A group of friends raises glasses in a silent toast, the amber liquid catching the low light. You sip again, savoring the complexity, the burn, the sweetness, the social ritual condensed into one tiny cup. Outside, the street hums with neon and exhaust fumes. You pass a diner where a father and son share a milkshake, and in the adjacent bar, men argue quietly over cards and beer. Somewhere, jazz seeps from a small club, blending with the rumble of tires and voices. The night feels alive yet grounded. Familiar yet fleeting, a perfect reflection of mid-century America's duality. You wander toward the waterfront. The moon casts silver streaks over the water, and the smell of the sea mixes with fried dough and whiskey from nearby establishments. Sailboats rock gently at anchor, and a lone musician strums a guitar, accompanying a soft, distant voice singing a song of longing, joy, and human connection. The journey of alcohol throughout human history. Sumerian beer, Egyptian honeyed brews, Greek wine, Roman revelry, monastic patience, medieval taverns, rum-soaked voyages, gin-fueled London industrial alehouses, and modern cocktails has culminated here. Every sip you take carries the echoes of millennia, the rituals of survival, celebration, and memory. And as you watch a neon sign flicker over the water, you realize that humanity's desire to drink, to escape, to celebrate, to connect is as relentless and enduring as the tides themselves. The centuries may pass, the vessels may change, the recipes may evolve, but the impulse remains the same, eternal in its simplicity and complexity. You take one last sip from your glass, letting the warmth spread slowly, a quiet tribute to the long, winding history that has brought you here, to this moment under this moonlit sky. You awaken again, but the world around you is brighter, busier, and faster. Late 20th century urban nightlife has taken over. The neon glow of city streets cuts through the night, reflecting off wet asphalt. Cars hum, taxis honk, and the faint thrum of bass vibrates through the sidewalks. The scent of exhaust mixes with frying oil, perfume, and the ever-present tang of alcohol seeping from open bar doors and street corners. You step into a bustling nightclub, where strobe lights flash over throngs of people dancing to electronic beats. The air is thick with movement, heat, and the sharp sweetness of cocktails. Bartenders juggle bottles with precision, creating flaming drinks that sizzle and shimmer before being handed off to patrons. You see martinis, Long Island iced teas, and a dizzying array of colorful concoctions, each one an invitation to temporary escape. You take a seat at the bar, sliding onto a vinyl stool worn smooth by years of elbows and elbows companions. The bartender nods, sliding a glass of tequila toward you. The smell is sharp, bracing, almost electric, and the first sip burns like a brand new fire. It's a far cry from the monk's ale or the rum on Caribbean ships, but the principle is unchanged. A liquid that carries warmth, thrill, and community all at once. Nightclubs, bars, and lounges have become not just places to drink, but theaters of social ritual. The dance floor is the stage, the DJ the conductor, and alcohol the currency of courage, charm, and charisma. People sip to loosen inhibitions, to connect, to flirt, to forget, to celebrate. History pulses in each cocktail, each sip, each shared glance. You notice a small group laughing by the corner, toasting with brightly colored drinks that glow under neon lights. They remind you of the Sumerians raising their cups to Ninkasi. Another group dances wildly, echoing Greek symposium energy, celebrating life and sensation. Somewhere in the middle, someone spills a drink and laughter erupts. Chaos, joy, ritual unchanged across millennia, merely evolving in presentation. Historians still argue whether modern drinking culture empowers social bonding or masks the loneliness and stress of urban life. But in this club, it doesn't feel academic. You feel it in your chest, in the buzz of conversation, the pulse of the music, the camaraderie of strangers temporarily united in rhythm and spirit. Outside, the streets hum with late-night life, diners, corner stores, taxis, and the occasional flash of sirens. The smell of fried food mingles with perfume and exhaust, a modern alchemy that somehow feels ancient in its own way. People move in a human tide, guided as much by instinct as by urban planning, carrying drinks in paper cups or sleek glassware. You pause to watch a street performer juggling bottles of colored alcohol while singing, the crowd cheering. The sight feels timeless, like watching a Roman poet recite verses over wine or a medieval tavern sing along to a folk tune. Humanity's need to celebrate, to mark existence with shared rituals and liquid courage persists. You sip your tequila again, savoring the sharpness, the thrill, and the connection it fosters, even in a room crowded with strangers. And you realize that the journey of alcohol, from its earliest fermented grains to sacred offerings to communal survival to indulgence and art, continues to shape not only human culture but human experience itself. The night stretches on, the music thumps, laughter rises and falls like waves. You raise your glass in silent tribute to the millennia of human ingenuity, desire, and resilience that brought this moment into being. Even here, amidst neon and bass, the ancient pulse persists, the eternal human quest for warmth, escape, connection, and transcendence through a simple sip. The morning light arrives differently this time, filtered through skyscraper glass and the faint buzz of traffic. You find yourself in early 21st century urban life where alcohol has become both a personal ritual and a social performance, seamlessly woven into daily existence. Cafes, bars, rooftop lounges, and craft breweries surround you, each offering a spectrum of drinks, from artisanal cocktails to locally brewed IPAs, each with its own story and identity. You step into a modern craft brewery, the air rich with the scent of malt, hops, and fermenting yeast. Stainless steel tanks glint under industrial lights and the floor vibrates faintly from machinery. The brewmaster greets you warmly, guiding you past the fermentation tanks. "We experiment with flavors now," she says. "From hibiscus to chili, we're taking tradition and twisting it into something new." You sip a pale ale, noticing the subtle floral notes balanced with the bitterness of hops. It's a far cry from the simple ales of monks or alewives, yet the connection remains, the human desire to transform raw ingredients into something that nurtures, celebrates, or escapes. Each sip carries history, memory, and culture in its layered taste. Around you, patrons sip, laugh, and photograph their drinks for social media, turning consumption into storytelling and performance. Here, alcohol is not just sustenance or survival, it's expression, status, and ritual. The ancient instinct to raise a cup, to share, to mark the moment continues, but with added layers of technology, marketing, and self-presentation. You notice a small group engaged in a tasting session. They swirl their glasses, inhale deeply, and discuss notes of citrus, vanilla, and caramel with the reverence of monks studying manuscripts. It's the same devotion seen centuries ago, merely translated into modern language and measurement. Historians still argue whether this craft beer renaissance represents a return to authenticity or a commodification of tradition. But as you watch the room, you see something else: the unbroken human instinct to create, experiment, and share experiences through alcohol. Later, you step outside onto a rooftop terrace, the city stretching endlessly below. Neon signs mingle with LED billboards, traffic flows like veins, distant music drifts up from a street festival. You sip a cocktail garnished with a sprig of rosemary, the drink's aroma mingling with the evening breeze. In this moment, the long chain of history from Sumerian beer and Egyptian wine to monastic ale, tavern alewives, rum sailors, gin-fueled London, industrial pints, and 20th century cocktails feels tangible. People pass by on the street, laughing, arguing, sharing drinks, celebrating birthdays, heartbreaks, or simply surviving another day. You realize that the modern obsession with artisanal craft, mixology, and curated experiences is just the latest expression of humanity's eternal need to connect, escape, and mark life's passage with liquid. As night deepens, the city glows with reflections in puddles, windows, and metallic surfaces. You raise your glass silently to all the centuries, all the people, all the rituals that brought humanity to this point. Each sip, each shared laugh, each toast is a continuation of an ancient story. And somewhere in the hum of urban life, you recognize the eternal rhythm. Humans have always sought warmth, connection, and transcendence, one drink at a time. You awaken to a quieter world, yet one no less connected to the pulse of history. It is the present day, a time when alcohol is both commonplace and complex, threaded into culture, ritual, economy, and identity. You find yourself walking through a vibrant urban street, where the scents of coffee, baked bread, and craft cocktails mingle in the morning air. Neon signs coexist with historical buildings, and people move in purposeful rhythms, coffee cups in hand, reusable bottles at their sides, some already nursing mimosas. You enter a contemporary bar, minimalistic and polished, its design sleek, the lighting soft. Patrons sit on high stools or lounge in leather chairs, sipping everything from IPA flights to small batch whiskey neat. You notice a group engaged in a tasting experience, led by a knowledgeable guide describing flavor notes, brewing processes, and fermentation techniques with almost religious reverence. Every sip is a sensory journey, a connection to centuries of experimentation, survival, and pleasure. You try a cocktail infused with local botanicals, tasting the subtle balance of bitter, sweet, and herbal notes. It's sophisticated, intentional, and mindful, a far cry from the chaotic, necessity-driven drinks of centuries past. Yet the impulse remains unchanged: to savor, to celebrate, to escape, to connect. The rituals of humanity endure. Outside, the streets are alive with options: wine bars, microbreweries, pop-up events, and casual pubs. People toast at tables in parks, on rooftops, and in backyards, their laughter mingling with street music. Alcohol is now a medium for creativity, personal expression, and shared experience, but its essence is the same: warmth, joy, connection, and sometimes oblivion. Historians still argue whether today's drinking culture, Instagrammed cocktails, curated tasting events, cocktail competitions, is a celebration of craft or a commodification of ancient tradition. Yet as you watch people clinking glasses, laughing, and savoring every drop, it seems clear: alcohol remains a powerful social glue, a personal comfort, and a ritual that transcends time. You pause and reflect on the journey you've witnessed. Sumerian farmers offering barley to Ninkasi, Egyptians brewing honeyed drinks along the Nile, Greeks and Romans indulging in symposia, monks perfecting ale in stone cellars, medieval alewives crafting survival and community, rum-laden ships crossing oceans, gin-fueled London streets, industrial-era pubs, modern cocktails, and craft breweries. Every era has its flavor, every cup a story, every sip a link in the chain of human experience. As night falls, the city lights shimmer like stars, and you take one final sip from your glass. You feel the warmth spread through your chest, the centuries of history mingling with the present moment, the collective longing and ingenuity of countless generations distilled into a single, fleeting experience. You step onto the quiet street, letting the hum of the city wrap around you. Somewhere, laughter rises, somewhere glasses clink, somewhere the ancient pulse of humanity, the desire to connect, celebrate, escape, and remember continues as relentless and eternal as time itself. And in this shared, liquid history, you understand one final truth. Humans have always sought to feel alive, to taste life in all its bitterness and sweetness, one drink at a time.